I'm on my phone. I don't know what happened with the computer. I'm sorry about that. Okay, and I'm looking here to see who's with us. I do see that on the now my camera's going. I give up. John and Gary, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, John, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Wendy and Tony will not be joining us this evening, unfortunately. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm sorry for the delay. First thing I have to do is to read Governor Baker's announcement that this meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order, March 12, 2020, pursuant to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have suspended public gatherings. As such, the governor's order suspends requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. We are currently meeting remotely, and as such, all votes will be taken by roll call vote in accordance with Regulation 940 CMR 29.10 of the open meeting law. Okay, our first item is to review and act on the minutes of the February 22nd meeting. What is the board's pleasure?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Woodbury?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And as previously announced, Mr. Pepe and Mrs. Berthium are not with us this evening. Thank you, gentlemen. We're now going to move to citizens' input. Citizens' input.
I would like to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Denise LaCroix.
Hello, Denise.
Hi. I'm calling tonight about the cemetery, Pine Grove Cemetery. I was going to discuss the pamphlet that went out, but I'm going to wait until I get more information. But I found, I called the Attorney General today, and Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 114, Section 18, the care of neglected burial places within the limits of town. Any town having within its limits an abandoned or neglected burial ground may take charge of the same and keep it in good order, and may appropriate money therefore, but no property rights shall be violated. No body shall be disinterred. No fence, tomb, monument, or other structure shall be removed or destroyed. The same may be repaired or restored. And there's also Section 16, appropriation for care of public cemeteries. Any town may annually appropriate and raise by taxation such sums as may be necessary to care for and keep in good order and to protect by proper fences any and all burial grounds within the town with 10 or more bodies are interred which are not properly cared for by its owners. And the care and protection of such burial grounds shall be in charge of the cemetery commissions, and if the town has no such officers, otherwise in charge of the selectmen. So anyways, I am for the town taking over the care of Pine Grove Cemetery, and I know it's going to be, I'm not sure if it's going to be at the annual or a special town meeting, but I wanted to share this information with you.
Thank you, Denise. We will be discussing that later in the meeting, and I see that Lynn Stevens is with us on the meeting. So I'm sure we'll have a good discussion on that in a short while. Anyone else on citizen input, please?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello?
Citizen
Chair?
Yes, I heard Bill Shimmitt first.
Dr. Hicks.
Yes, Bill.
First, I want to thank the fire chief and the Board of Health for being able to service our homebound folks with the COVID vaccine. Also, I know they're working to get the teachers and school staff for the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District vaccinated. My question, sir, is where do we stand with Howe Village? Depot Village? And are we working with Astorwood and Senior Living at Prouty to make sure all our congregate senior living facilities in town are being vaccinated?
Well, I know that Chief Parsons has that answer, and I'm going to defer to him. The answer is some of them have been done. But Chief Parsons, if you're on the call, would you please give us some detail?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Gary,
this is Gary. That is our next item, so you want to keep going with citizens input and we'll have them answer it at the next item.
okay, let's do that then, okay? Anyone else on citizen input?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please identify yourself.
Danielle Gibo, Brown Street.
Yes, Danielle.
I would like to see the town consider opening our town back up. If that
In
could
what
be
respect?
placed on a future, I'm sorry,
In what respect, Danielle?
open the town back up for the people to move about freely. After a year of being in this situation, it's starting to cause more problems than this COVID-19.
Really, how many people have died from that, Danielle?
I'm not here to argue with you.
Oh,
I'm asking for it to.
With COVID-19, and COVID-19 has killed a lot of people in this town. I know several. And what has this done that's killed people? I can't think of
Sir, this
anything
is
worse.
citizens' input, and I would like to do that.
Go right ahead. Finish your argument.
Thank you. It's causing serious problems with depression, anxiety, etc. And after a year, I believe people know how to social distance and keep themselves safe. If they choose to wear a mask, then they should be able to do that. If they choose not to wear a mask, they should be able to do that as well. We've had a lot of people who have been infected with the COVID-19. We also have a lot of people that have had the vaccination. And I would hope that the town would consider opening buildings and restaurants back up. I hope that's considered in the future. Thank you.
You're welcome. Danielle, a lot of what you're saying is not under the Board of Selectmen's purview. Governor Baker is the one calling the shots on that, not the Board of Selectmen. He's the one that determines what the capacity should be in various businesses and restaurants, as well as the mask wearing. So that's not something we are able to override the governor on. So I'm sorry about that. We can reopen town buildings when it's appropriate. We are starting to give some thought. Mr. Gregory actually mentioned it in a report to us last week. And we're very close to being able to do that as long as the numbers don't go in the other direction. But it is a lot of what you're talking about, I'm afraid, is Governor Baker's call, not ours. But thank you for your input, Danielle. Anyone else?
Governor Baker put these forward as mandates. They're not laws. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have citizen input?
A mandate is a law.
All right, that's Mr. Schmidt, I believe. Anyone else? have
Mr.
citizen
Chairman?
input? Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
please. Matthew, yes?
This is Albert
Go ahead.
Atchew, 98 Middle Road, Spencer.
Who's this, please? 298 Middle Road. Al H.U.?
Yes, Al Atchew, Middle Road, Spencer. Can you hear me?
Oh, how are you? Yes, I can hear you. Thank
Fine.
you.
I haven't talked to you guys in a long time.
Good to hear your voice.
I'm calling to thank the police department, the fire department, the utilities and facilities department, clerk's office, the finance committee, Lisa Dow in the Board of Health, and for all their hard work in the past year. They did a lot of extra work. I know they did. So I want to say thank you to all of them. Now let's get to the Board of Health. The Board of Selectmen. Mrs. Berthume, Mr. Pepe, Mr. Woodbury, Mr. Howard, Dr. Hicks, and I want to include Mr. Monette, seeing he was the beginning of the year. I want to let you know I appreciate all the work that you guys did to keep this town running. You deserve a great thank you from the town. Also, the town administrator's office, Brenda, has done a lot, I know, to keep these meetings running. A couple of things she's done for me just recently. She sent me something knowing my condition that made it easier for me to read it. And so I want to thank her for being the professional she always has been. And now the town administrator. I want to thank him for the superior job he's done trying to straighten this town's budget out and keep it going for the last year or so, knowing he had to keep changing figures, not knowing what revenue's coming in. And I know he had to put a lot of hours into it. So I want to thank them. And I thank all the residents in town who run into one of you guys or policemen, firemen in a coffee shop, a market or whatever, should go up and say thank you for the job they're doing for the past year.
Thank you, Al.
Did you guys? Okay. Now, seeing that's all been said, I think, I know I've been in front of you guys before, and it hasn't always been a pleasure for either side. But this time it has been, and I really appreciate you guys. But I think it's time, seeing the governor has expanded his things, his openings and stuff, I think it's time that we open the town hall for meetings. You can social distance in that hall 6 feet apart. And I've been to the selectmen meeting, unless it's a big item, public hearing, there's only a few people in there and they can social distance. Most of the clerks in there are behind glass. So I think it's time to open them, the library. Oh, I forgot. I appreciate the library too. They do a great job. So I think it's time to do that. And I want to thank you guys for your time tonight. And I hope you have a good night.
Thank you, Al. Just so you know.
All right,
Al,
guys.
Thank you.
Good
Al.
night, guys. Yep.
Thank you, Al. We miss you.
Yeah, well, open up and I'll be there.
Attaboy.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. You too, Al. You
Yep.
too. All righty. Citizen input. Do we have another person wishes to speak on citizen input?
I'd like to. Ralph Bob Serba, 23 Summit Street.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I just want to echo the comments from Al and from Danielle. I see kids at Big Y working. I see seniors at Big Y working. Restaurants are 100% capacity. The town hall is certainly set up. It lends itself to being open. There's already plexiglass up or glass up in almost all the offices. This is ridiculous. It's like, we got Lisa doused out at restaurants. The place is packed and doesn't say anything about it. It's like, if it wasn't for Bob Parsons, and I think we owe him a great debt of gratitude for getting the job done this year and trying to make sure that seniors get taken care of, and also working on loans, on the PPE loan program and everything else that's been going on. I think Bob's done an exemplary job, and I think he's picking up a lot of the slack for some of the folks in the Board of Health that aren't. And I think it's way past time to open up the town hall. Ralph, you've even mentioned yourself, you've been out at restaurants. You can take unless you're eating food through a mask, Ralph, you're taking your mask off to eat. So what difference does it make if we can't open the town hall? It is past time, and this has been a dragged out process, and it's now 100% in the restaurants. There's no reason not to open the town hall. Just my 2 cents.
Bob, it's 100% in the town hall as long as the tables are 6 feet apart. That's what I heard the governor say. And my wife and I have not eaten out in a restaurant since mid to late November when the numbers started to surge. I've gotten takeout food from a number of restaurants, but we have not eaten in a restaurant for months.
Well, you're missing the point, Ralph.
And
Everybody else is eating in restaurants.
we're dying to. We're dying to, okay? And we did have our first COVID shot. When we get our second COVID shot, we're going to wait 2 weeks. And then we do plan on eating out in a restaurant, but we're going to go at off times to be safe because, you know, it's still out there. And even if you've got the shots, it's 95% protected. There's still that 5% if you get it, although it does enhance the fact that you're not going to die from it, according to the CDC, and you're not going to get it as serious. But nevertheless, I don't even want to get it even if it's a mild case. But that's just to clarify.
That's your call, Ralph.
The Hickses have not been out to eat for almost 4 months. Okay, but I appreciate your comments, Bob, and I want the town hall open as soon as possible. We are going to talk about it later on. It is in the administrator's report. We are going to talk about it towards the end of the meeting, okay? Thank you for your input,
I appreciate
Bob.
that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Okay, anyone else, please, on citizen input?
Dr. Hicks,
Yes, please.
this is Mr. Shemuth again. I would support the effort to have a phased-in, controlled, safe reopening of the town hall as well as the library, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome, Bill. You're welcome. Anyone else on citizen input?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Jonathan Viner. I was looking for an update, I guess similar to opening the town hall, but in regards to when boards can start meeting in person again.
I think, John, that's going to be when we reopen the town hall.
All right. I mean, it's my other question was where do things stand regarding the? All right, somebody needs to mute their phone.
Yeah, I agree.
So my other question is, where do things stand regarding the audit being conducted on the planning board revolving account?
Be honest with you, I have no idea. I'll try to get you an answer.
All right, well, I'd appreciate if myself and the board was kept up to date on that.
Well, it's in process, John. I don't know where in the process it is, but it is in process. We've signed the paperwork, and I expect it'll be done rapidly.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, John. Anyone else, citizen input?
Citizen input? Citizen input. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to go on to item 4. There will be another chance at citizen input at the end of the meeting. Review and act on coronavirus COVID-19 response. Lisa Doust, are you there, please? Would you give us a report if you are?
I am here.
Hi, Lisa.
We have had, hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good, thanks. We are at 730 confirmed cases. We have 19 active. We're no longer red. We have dropped. We are still at yellow. Commonwealth Vaccination Call Center. The number is 211 or 877-211-6277. Those numbers are on the website. Anyone who needs help booking a vaccine, they can call me at the office and I will help book them an appointment when there is one available. If not, I'll take their names and numbers and call them back when appointments are available. I've been taking a list, and appointments, as they become available, I call them back, and I've booked everybody on my list as of today. So everybody was very pleased. Rutland is allotting us vaccines. We will be going around to the homebound Spencer residents this Thursday. Chief Parsons did send out a reverse 911 informing the residents to either call myself, Chief Parsons, or Pam Woodbury at the senior center. We've compiled a list. If there's any nurses out there that are willing to volunteer on Thursday, if they could please contact me or Chief Parsons and let us know if they're available on Thursday, that would be much appreciated. And also March 15th, we will be doing the vaccine clinic for all of Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District at the David Patty Gym from 2:30 to 5. So another great thing that's happening.
That's for staff, Lisa, correct?
Yeah, staff, also AA transportation bus drivers will be involved in that and getting vaccinated.
Great.
They have to sign up. Dr. Hahi sent out an email and they need to sign up. There was a link sent out, so they need to sign up.
Very good. Lisa, can you or Bob Parsons, if he's there, give us an update on the question we had earlier about Howe Village and senior living at Prouting and the other congregate housing facilities in Spencer on the vaccination? I know Howe Village has been done, but I'd like to get a rundown on everything if you can, please.
Yes, Howe Village was done. Big Y did Howe Village. Prouty Senior Living, I believe, was done by CVS. They're all private. They've all contacted their own certain pharmacies to do each congregate setting. I know Astorwood, I believe they paired up with Walgreens out of Holden, and they were done. And like I said, Big Y did Astorwood. I believe CVS out of Worcester did Prouty Senior Living. And I forgot who else Mr. Shemesh was asking about.
Depot Village,
I
Mr.
think the depot project, which I believe is on.
I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure about them, but I will find out tomorrow.
Okay, you can let us know next week, please.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, please.
Wall Street is part of Spencer Housing. I believe they were done the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Questions? Yes, please.
This is Tom. I'd like to, if I could, just give a brief update and acknowledge some of the resident concerns that were just recently raised this evening, and talk about what I'd like to roll out in the next few weeks.
Yes.
So what I'd like to ask, I'd first like to ask the board to give their blessing on phasing out the rotational work from home schedule for the employees. If you recall, we put that in place first back in, I would say, mid-April of last year when the numbers were really high. And it stayed in effect through into the summertime, and then it was eased back, or removed, I should say, when the numbers went way down. So now we're back in a situation where the numbers are down. I think the 7-day positivity rolling rate, test rate, is 1.75 plus or minus, which puts us back in, where we were back in September. So we've purchased and installed where needed in town buildings, plastic partitions. And I would also say that I would keep in place the mask wearing requirement in the public buildings for employees, those employees who can't work within a closed office. So I'd first like to ask the board to support me phasing out the work from home rotational schedule. Secondly, I hear loud and clear the concerns about opening town hall to the public. What I'd like to do is prepare for the board's meeting on the 22nd, a comprehensive plan that would, it gives me a chance to speak with town council, talk about the legal liability issues that may come into play. The last capacity number that we were having to deal with was 8 persons indoors per 1,000 square feet. If you recall, that was the number that we were using or had to use under the governor's executive order when it came to public meetings. And that's how we arrived at the number of 7 for a total capacity number in McCourt Hall. So I need some time, a little bit of time to speak with town council, get a sense of whether that's still in play, and then also operationally figure out what do we need to do to phase in, what else do we need to do to phase in reopening town hall to the public. I'm thinking contact tracing, will we be required or be advised to have a sign in at the entrances, sort of thing. So my plan is to have for the board on March 22nd a comprehensive reopening implementation plan.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Okay. Anything else on this item? Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 'cause I wasn't sure. I've had a problem with my computer tonight, and it is working again. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we move on to new business. Item A, 5A is to review and act on the Materials Service Award recipient for 2020. Mr. Gregory, you have a report, I believe?
I do, Mr. Chairman. So we've received 3 nominations, all for Thomas Parker. Mr. Parker served the town for 29 years as a call firefighter. He served in various roles in committees for another 14 years. And he most recently served on the, as you all know, on the Finance Committee. So that's Mr. Parker is the individual who's been nominated.
Okay, thank you very much. What is the board's pleasure? I know Mr. Parker, and I know he's a dedicated public servant. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Harry here. I would definitely recommend Thomas Parker and vote to move it forward.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, roll call vote. Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
Mr. Howard,
Aye.
chair votes aye. And as I indicated earlier, Mrs. Berthium and Mr. Pepe are not with us this evening. Congratulations, Tom. You deserve it, and we'll look forward to seeing you at a future meeting.
Great choice.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on now to Chief Darren, who will review the Board of Selectmen's revised, no, that's not, existing policies for police department use of force, crowds, and demonstrations, and the promotional process. Chief Darren?
Yes, Dr. Hicks, how are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. How are you?
Good, how are you? Before you, you have copies of all these, several policies, which I'm proposing a variety of updates. And just for your information, these have all been successfully impact bargained with the union. The drafts you have before you show the amendments with a strike through and the additions in yellow highlight. And as all of you, I'm sure, are aware that the legislature recently passed a police reform bill. So most of what I'm proposing here tonight, at least, are pretty much just cut and paste with what we're going to be obligated to do in accordance with the new legislation. These first two will take effect July 1st. So if you do approve these, the first two would request that they be effective on that date of July 1st. Just to give you, I figured we'd maybe handle these one at a time, if that's your preference. Let me just run through the use of force so you get an idea of what the changes and additions may be, and I'm just going to touch on these as like general categories. The first one is the use of force. When the use of force may be used has been altered. What is the definition of lethal force has been changed. What's the definition of serious bodily injury has been changed. There's an addition of a chokehold prohibition. There's an added element of de-escalation, which must be employed before the use of force. There's a duty to intervene that has been interjected into use of force situations. There's a change as far as when lethal force may be used. There's a change in regards to firing at a motor vehicle. There's an expanded definition of what we refer to as an expandable baton. It's the baton that the police officers carry and when it may be used. There's also a definition, expanded definition of kinetic energy impact projectiles, which are basically what we use are the bean bags that are shot out of a traditional 12-gauge shotgun and when they may be used. And lastly, a public safety statement, which would be myself or a designee that after there was a significant use of force that we would make a general public statement to let everyone know basically what's going on and what's being investigated and where we go from that particular point.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
So if you have any questions on that, do you want me to run through the other two or we want to do this first? Your pleasure.
I'm okay going ahead if the board doesn't mind. You're on a roll.
Sure. The second is the crowds and demonstrations, and this is something that we put in, you folks approved just a few meetings ago. The changes in there are not quite as in depth. Basically, there's an element where we're mandated to reach out and communicate with the demonstration organizers to try and make things more civil. There's not a prohibition, but a limit on use of chemical weapons and rubber bullets and the use of canines to intimidate the folks. There's an accountability section, which says that basically, we've got to do all these things or else we're in trouble for the most part. And then there's an investigation part where when the new part of the new legislation creates a peace officer standards and training committee. So those folks would be in charge of investigating if they felt that there was any malfeasance on our part regarding employing this particular policy. And then again, this is another one, July 1st would be the effective date that I would be looking for.
Okay.
And then last but not least, this is one that isn't related to the police reform, but it's amendments to our promotional policy. And as I said, they're not involved with the legislation. The amendments are as a result of my personal research in conjunction with the union to reflect more current methods and reflect the fact that we have a more junior workforce. Basically, what we've come up with is we would eliminate the written exam and rely solely on the assessment center, which would be done by an outside agency. And basically, the written exam has been dropped from the civil service promotional process a couple of years ago. And then next, we would amend the supplemental point system. There'd be a maximum of seven points that could be added to the score of the assessment center for the final deliberation. The amendments include points for education, longevity. We basically trimmed down the longevity because we were counting 1 point for every year of service, which basically made somebody with 20 or 25 years would would basically, you couldn't top them regardless of what your score was if there was a junior officer that was interested in the position. So we basically want to try and put all the scores and all the possibilities within reach of a junior officer should someone of that nature seek a position. And then a little bit, a point or two for outside employment and within the police field, and then and actually be able to minus a point if there's disciplinary issues. So like I said, this one I'd be recommended it would take effect immediately because we'd probably put out an exam within 3 or 4 months or so. And it's not related to the police reform legislation, just basically research between myself and the union. And
That's fine, sir.
You got it. It's a mouthful.
Well, thank you for your efforts.
Sure. Plenty of
board members?
anything you got for questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, board members or Mr. Gregory, any questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would just remind the board that because these are amendments to existing policies, the board can act this evening if it so chooses. In other words, the policy on policies, which has the 2 meeting requirement, doesn't apply with these particular policies tonight because these are amendments.
Okay, thank you for that information, Mr. Gregory. Gary, John, questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'm pretty clear on it. I don't know if we want to give the other 2 members that aren't with us tonight an opportunity, but I'm willing to move forward on this. I think it's well written. I've read it several.
Mr. Howard?
I'm
Thank you,
willing to
Gary.
make a motion to accept.
Okay, we have a motion to accept all 4?
Yes.
All 3, right?
3.
Well, 3.
3.
Okay, I thought we were going to check them separately, but you want to check them together? That's fine. I was thinking the 4 items under use of force, but okay, all 3.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would recommend, seeing that there's a spread of distinction between the 3 of them, that we take the 3 individually. So John, if you would.
I'll amend my motion.
to
Accept
response
all.
and resistance first. To amend
However you
use
want
of
to break
force
it.
to response and resistance.
Correct.
Okay, everybody clear
Okay.
what we're doing?
Yeah.
Further discussion necessary? Yes, no?
No.
Hearing none, a roll call vote. Mr. Howard,
Aye.
Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay, we'll move on to crowds and demonstrations. Motion,
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
okay, discussion. Roll call vote. Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
Mr. Howard,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Promotional process. Sergeant,
So moved.
Second.
discussion. Roll call vote. Mr. Howard,
Aye.
Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate your efforts. You've done a great job for the past over 20 years and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's much appreciated. Appreciate your support.
You're welcome, sir. You're welcome. Okay, we're going to move on now to review and act on Board of Selectmen's revised Cable Advisory Committee charge for the 2023 Charter License Renewal. Mr. Gregory.
Mr. Chairman, in the board's packet is an updated Cable Advisory Committee charge. The only revision is the dates to reflect the upcoming license renewal. All the other elements of the charge remain as they were from 2012.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, discussion. All those in favor, Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
Mr. Howard,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Thank you. We'll move on now to review and act on the non-voting Select Board Liaison to the Cable Advisory Committee per the Cable Advisory Committee charge. What is your pleasure? We need to have someone to go to these meetings, to come back and report to us, and also to provide guidance to the Cable Advisory Committee.
You know how often they meet?
I don't think they've established yet, but they have a couple of years to get this done. So I'm going to think they're not going to meet more than once a month, John. I'd be surprised if they meet more than once a month.
I'd be willing to take a shot at that.
Thank you, John. Gary, would you like to make a motion?
Unless Mr. Woodbury would rather do it.
In all my spare time, let me think about that. I make a motion that John is a liaison to the Cable Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, you can second that.
I'm going to second it. And John, I would have volunteered for this, except the only time I have left is in my sleep, and I don't get much of that lately.
Well, there's not much on TV, so it might be worth it.
On the motion, hearing no discussion. Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
Mr. Howard,
I'll recuse myself.
it won't pass then. You have to
Oh.
vote.
It's 2-1.
That's a majority.
If I need to, I will.
You do, John, you have to vote. There's only three of us, so,
Okay. I'll vote yes.
okay. And the chair votes aye. Thank you, John, for volunteering for that position. Okay, we're going to review and act on the change of the town clerk position from elected to appointed. Gary, would you like to explain this?
So, Mr. Chairman, back when Administrator Gaudette was here, we looked into actually making the treasurer collector, that was on the town warrant, to make it appointed. And we were looking at also the town clerk. So I had asked Tom, prior to me taking out papers, to look into this and see what the details were to move this forward. And I know he has checked it out. He could probably provide more information. But I think as this town moves forward, I think a lot of these positions, as you know, if you look at our own board, trying to get people to step up. And I think by hiring an interim this past time, I think it proves to us that there are, and I'm not saying we don't have capable people, but that I just think these positions now become more critical as we move forward. It's the operations and the nuts and bolts of the town. So I wanted this brought up just for discussion. And Tom did a little research on it, so he can add on whatever he wants. But I just think all these need to be discussed, so that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think it merits discussion. I wouldn't want to take a vote tonight without the other two members being present. This is too big of a thing for us to do without having all five board members weigh in on it. Mr. Gregory, would you like to explain your research here with Chapter 41, et cetera?
Sure. I reached out after Gary reached out to me. I forwarded the request to Janelle, our town council, and there are two procedural ways this can be accomplished. There's, by statute, Chapter 41, Section 1B requires that the change first be approved at town meeting, either an annual or a special, and then at an annual town election. But the town meeting vote must occur at least 60 days prior to the date the question will appear on the ballot. So if the town wanted to use that method, it's on the annual town meeting warrant, and then the earliest it could appear on a ballot would be 60 days after that date. That would be a special town election, or the town would have to wait, we'd have to wait until following year's annual town election. The other method is a special legislation, a home rule petition. So town meeting may authorize by majority vote the filing of special legislation, and then that puts it in the hands of the state legislature. And there's really no way of predicting how long that could take. It's handed to the state legislature and their legislative cycle. So those are the two methods that could be used.
Thank you, Tom. I want to make it clear that from my vantage point, we have a vacancy now, well, we will have a vacancy. We appointed Lisa Johnson, who we were very lucky to get when Mrs. Torty left unexpectedly. Lisa having town clerk experience in Boylston. And my goal would be that if we have a qualified person in the office, and this is just me speaking now as a private one member of this board, I would not be looking to replace that person with someone else. My concern is when the vacancy occurs, and if there is no qualified candidate on the ballot, or if someone runs who does not have the qualifications, Spencer could have a town clerk who is not qualified for the job. Same thing could be true if there were no one on the ballot and someone got a handful of signatures and got elected with, let's say, 10 signatures. This happens all the time with lesser offices. We've had with lesser offices, we've had cemetery commissioners elected by write-in. We've had our town moderator, which is an important position, elected by write-in because there was no name on the ballot. And the only reason I brought this up, asked to bring this up with Gary, is that I'm concerned that somewhere down the road, the board of the town of Spencer and the Board of Selectmen could be facing someone in that office who doesn't have a clue and may not have the educational background to be able to grasp what needs to be done. We were very lucky with a town election, a state primary, and a presidential election to have a former sitting town clerk step in and take Mrs. Torty's capable shoes and wear them appropriately and with pride. If somewhere down the road, we may not be that lucky. We may wind up with someone who is not capable of doing the job. And I think we've gotten to the point in this century that we're in the world that we live in, where a lot of these jobs are too important to take a chance with. And once again, if someone is in that job and doing a good job at it, I would fight to keep them to the last breath. I wouldn't want to replace somebody just for the sake of replacing someone. But if we don't start talking about doing it now and do it in the near future, we could find ourselves in trouble. As far as elections go, somebody's going to be elected. I think we've got a very promising candidate running, and that person will be in office. I don't see the need to do that in 60 days. We could wait till the next town election. We certainly don't have money to hold a special town election for something that would be completely irrelevant, as far as I'm concerned, until that person's term was up. And after that, that person, I expect, would continue in the position. So that's my 2 cents. Mr. Howard, do you want to wait?
There's good things and bad things about either way. I'm open to appointing someone, especially if they're in the position now and doing a good job, to go that route.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
So my thought process that brought this forward, and we've been very, very fortunate over the years, and you can name the names of the town clerks that, and I don't want to shed any negative on this. We've been very fortunate, from when Gene was there, Laura was in there, and the names go on and on. We've been very fortunate because we have, both Karen Gosher and Diane Ledoux, who still help out there. And through transition, it's always the assistant that ends up running for that position, as Lisa found out. And you have that background. Unfortunately, the criteria for that position requires them to be a town resident. We do not require our town administrator, our highway superintendent, our police chief, or our fire chief to be residents of the town, all critical positions. As you grow as a community, obviously, when you look at these positions, and you are right, Mr. Hicks, it is a popularity. And I just feel that because of the requirement of being a town resident and a registered voter in this town, we have limited access. I'm very fortunate over the umpteen years of being on the select board and being on several committees. I understand how municipal government works. However, that being said, is if we have qualified, is they're held back because of these requirements. So sometimes I have to question, are we doing the right thing for the town? So that's where I am on this. And it's not against anybody personal. We've been very fortunate. I can never say a bad word about anybody that sat in that office. But we are limiting our capabilities of that position. And thus why, I'm doing what I'm doing is because it's a critical position that needs to move forward. And I think we are very limited by the people who really get involved in town government without actually looking at the bigger picture. So that's where I'm coming from on this. So I just want to be clear. I'm not questioning anybody prior to, including the interim we have in there now. But I think when you limit that, and these are important functions of a municipality and town government, that's why, like I say, whether it's a town planner, fire chief, police chief, administrator, name the department, no other department is required to be a registered voter in this town or to live within the confines of the town. And some we do have a mileage limit within X amount of miles. But if we are really going to progress and hopefully move forward, I think this is something that needs to be looked at. And it doesn't mean, and again, I want to go back, is the people in these types of jobs, we're not throwing them out, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting as retirement comes, and God forbid if the next one doesn't live in town or the assistant doesn't live in town, then automatically they are out of the loop. And I think that's a problem. And it may not be today, but it certainly will be at some time in the near future. So that's where I'm coming from, Mr. Chairman, not to poke at anybody.
I pretty much share your thoughts. Thank you, Gary. I'm going to put this off, please, Mr. Gregory, to our March 22nd meeting. We will vote on it at that time and have a robust discussion at that time as well. And hopefully all 5 of us can be here at that time. So thank you all. Our next item, item F, is to review and act on Pine Grove Cemetery citizen petition to place a non-binding ballot question on the annual town election ballot. I saw Lynn Stevens earlier. Her face popped up on my screen. Are you there, Lynn?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, Lynn. Lynn, I know you've spoken to us before, but there are a lot of people here that didn't hear your original presentation. So I'm going to ask you to please explain the need, if you will. And I have to be, I'm going to have to turn this over to the vice chairman, since I am a property owner there. and it could be deemed a conflict of interest. I do believe I'm allowed to speak as a private citizen, and I may choose to do that at some point. And you will not have a quorum as a result of that, so there'll be no vote taken tonight, I'm afraid. It'll have to be put off till the 22nd. We'll need at least three, as myself and Mrs. Berthium, I believe, is also a property owner up in that neck of the woods. So, Mr. Woodbury, would you take over for me until the next item, please?
Certainly, Dr. Hicks. Thank you
Okay.
very much. And you are absolutely allowed to speak as a property owner of the parcel. So thank you for that.
Not as a member of the board.
So, that's correct. So Lynn, if you want to, I think it was Claire Harding who sent in the petition, but if you want to explain it a little bit, Lynn, go ahead.
Sure. I am the Secretary Treasurer for the Pine Grove Cemetery, and I have been since 2013. My husband, Dean, who's sitting over my shoulder here, is the president. Is the signer of the petition, or whatever the formal wording is because Dean and I now live in Holden. So we're not Spencer residents. We cannot sign the petition or put forth the petition. So Claire, who is a member of our board, did that. We do have several other people who are on the board who are Spencer residents, and almost all of them are lot owners, as Dean and I are, of the cemetery, except for our accountant, who is there as an advisor. Basically, the reason for the request to be put on the ballot at the annual town meeting is because the cemetery funds are dwindling. We do have very limited perpetual care funds left, but they are dwindling away because we don't have enough income to sustain the expenses and the groundskeepers that go along with running the cemetery. So that is the reason for the petition. In the meantime, we have distributed pamphlets to lot owners, and if you are listening and did not receive a pamphlet describing our situation and a request for donation, please email Pine Grove Cemetery Spencer MA at gmail.com, and I will send you a pamphlet. So that's basically it.
You getting the check?
Okay, thank you, Lynn. So just to be clear, and Lynn, if you can answer them, fine. If you can't, that's okay. I'll dig a little deeper. As I looked at what was submitted to the board, and I'm just going through it, and obviously you guys tend to run a deficit, just obviously from what I'm seeing, just so I look at your current liabilities, and then I look at there's one of the items, long-term liabilities, lists a loan payable to PC account. Do you know what that is? Because I'm not clear on that one.
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay.
That is something carried over from former president and secretary and treasurer. So I don't know what that is.
And obviously it's a nonprofit, so I got to do a little more digging. The other question I'll ask, and you may be able to answer, you may not, your restricted fund, which are your perpetual care account, and it shows 123,502. Is that not where we are now, or would you say that you're running?
Right now, we're probably about 17,000
in that account.
It's actually in two different company mutual funds.
Okay, and that was my next question, because you have one in Fidelity, you have one in Vanguard.
That's right.
I don't know who your financial advisor is. But
Gary Gaffin.
At $123,502, if that was in there, it's just based on over umpteen years, the last, at least the last 8 years, both Fidelity and Vanguard, I don't have them anymore, but have been actually getting a higher rate return on investment. So I guess I question on who set those up, but I can't fix that.
Well, those were all set up before we came on board, and they are mutual funds, so they don't have very much interest. And when I inquired about changing them over to something that would have a higher yield, I was advised against that by our accountant.
Okay, well, again, I can't, that's why you have an accountant. I'm not going to second guess what he does. Again, I always say it, but I know numbers. So a couple of things, and obviously a citizen's petition can go on the ballot. I know we talked about this before, and have to be clear on this, because I know that, and I'm disappointed that 123 is 17,000, so no wonder why you guys are struggling. But I can tell you, and I'm going back to when Mrs. LaCroix was on here, and she spoke about Chapter 114, Section 18 of Commonwealth of Mass General Laws. And she's right in what she stated, that any town having within its limits an abandoned or neglected burial ground may take, and here's the key, may take charge of it to keep it in good orders, and may appropriate money, but with no property rights, shall be violated, meaning, obviously we couldn't clear out the headstones and decimate the cemetery. That being said, I have to go back to our original conversation several months ago now, when we brought this up, is in order for the town, and I'll let Mr. Gregory weigh in on this, subject to the town, and if you abandon it, I guess again, the key is may, and again, we deal with unions, which would require union negotiations to get people in there, because we couldn't just go hire somebody to mow grass. It's a violation of our contracts. But that being said, at the end of the day, is if we were to take this cemetery, and that's a big what if under these situations, how do we find out if there's clear deed on that? There has to be a title search, and for any municipality to be able to take over from a nonprofit, there has to be clear title of some sort, and that is my belief on all the research I've done, but I'll let Mr. Gregory speak into it. So just because you guys have very limited funds, again, it's kind of, I guess we're both in a quagmire here trying to figure out how we rectify this. And I do know that, as I went up there and walked through, there's some pretty strong names on those headstones that have a good feel for, a lot of them are still business owners that I think could have possibly helped through this situation. I know you did the drive, and I commend you for that, because you worked hard, just in that drive virtually gave you a little breathing room to continue doing what you were doing, but not for the long-term effect of it. So I commend you for that, believe me. But I still think that at this point, we are going to struggle as a municipality to take on, and as we go on, you'll hear, as we go through our budget crunch, we've been looking for a building maintenance guy that I don't know where that's going to end up through this budget that we're faced with, and we'll work through it. But that could very well be a lost position that I've been fighting for well over 8 years to fill. So as I look at this, is how am I going to fill this when I can't take care of my buildings? And again, I asked the questions about the financial state because I did read through your tax returns. And I'm not done digging through them, obviously, but these were the few things that, in my opinion, stuck out to me. And again, I looked at the 123 that was in perpetual care, and first off, I'm astonished that it was able to be spent, because normally you can spend the interest, but a perpetual care account is in there for perpetuity. So I'm a little confused over that and how it got to that point. But
Well, if we
again,
didn't spend that, we'd be closing it a lot sooner than now. That's for sure, because we would not have been able to.
And Lynn, I'm not it's not a shot at you. I'm just because that was from that number. It was long before you were there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So survival rate has been fought off for a long time.
Right.
To get us to, I don't know, I guess.
The people before us,
I
do know that they struggled with increasing the price of the lots and also increasing the price of the funerals, because all the prices that we have to pay go up. But they struggled with that for a very long time before anything was done. And even the increases are not that great to make up a difference.
And I agree with you. On one of the other things, Lynn, and I don't know if you can answer this, but these are just questions I have, and if you can, I don't mind calling you on the phone. I look at the cost of opening the grave, cost of digging, whatever, and it looks like that. Seems like that's a losing proposition for you guys. And my concern is, and I don't know how you work compared to other cemeteries. I do know when my parents passed away, within the cost of the burial, I actually paid for the cemetery for the grave to be opened, to be closed, and none of that cost was put back on. And I'll be clear, that both of those were in Paxton Memorial. So I'm a little confused at how you guys end up paying, because normally, and I did check with some funeral directors, is normally that's within the cost to the family. So I'm a little confused over that too, but I haven't been able to go through all the numbers. But I think I do have a lot of questions, obviously. And it's not on you and it's not on Dean. But I will tell you, if I did have a plot there, I'd really be digging a lot harder, and I'll dig as hard as I can. But my concern tonight is if you guys, as far as the Mass General laws go, if you guys were to abandon that, then the town has the right to make sure that it doesn't get decimated, and make sure that that we may take charge of it. And that's the big word, may, because for us to again, we had the conversation before and I never got any answers for it. Is there a clear deed to that land? Was that land donated? Is there and I'm just coming from the municipal side, because I know from town government range it's not as easy as going to town meeting, and even if it got approved, we would have trouble putting bare minimum there, which could be, and when I talk about bare minimum, it could be that, yep, you have a burial, and we will plow that road to get you in there. It doesn't mean that we would be mowing between the headstones. So there's a lot more to this when you look at Mass General Law and you look at Chapter 114, Section 18, which Mrs. LaCroix did bring up, and she is right, that is the Mass General Law. But it also doesn't say decisively what we're responsible for. So, and I'm going to go back to the subject. Go ahead.
I know this is not a citizen input thing. I want to provide you with critical information. This is Bill Shemuth. I'm on the Open Space Plan Committee, which hasn't been officially submitted yet. And this is a primary issue as far as cemetery is providing protection of open space. There may be resources if we can include this in the open space plan before it's officially submitted. So if the person you're speaking to could get in touch with the town planner and we can get this in the open space plan for protection of cemeteries, because the congregational one is part of that, then we may be able to get grants for this. So that would be my recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shemuth, and you jumped way ahead of me because that's where I was going with this, because of the fact that the other old cemetery is where my family is buried.
Who will you contact? The town planner? Mr. Shemuth?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you had more to say or ask, Gary, but regarding the family paying for the grave opening and closing, you are absolutely right. That is done through the funeral parlor. And what happens is the funeral parlor takes that money and the fee for the cemetery and puts it into a check and gives it to the superintendent at the cemetery the day of the funeral. So we get that money in and it's counted on the books as income, but then we have to put out half of that money towards paying for the grave opening and closing. So in reality, yes, the family is paying for it, but it passes through our books. So we have to account for it in that way.
I agree 100% with you, Lynn, and I know that it comes up as a negative on your part. And if nothing else, and all those fees are accounted for, whoever digs the grave site, whoever closes the grave site, puts a vault in, all that is you're right, that's on the funeral director. I guess the only reason I brought it up is because it shows you guys is operating negative when that happens. And again, that could be a tax thing. I don't know. I'm not a tax person, and I'm not a CPA. And that was the only question. Is it should, my mind says that it's paid for. It should never turn up as a negative, even though it passes through your books and it gets paid out. It shouldn't come back as a negative to you. It should be, if nothing else, it should be an even line item, I guess is what I'm looking at. And those were just some questions. It wasn't to put you on the stuff that I pick out as I go over the numbers. I didn't know if you could answer it, that's all. But again, we do have a citizen's petition. It is signed, and by statute, it's up to the selectmen to move it forward. However, with the amount of signatures, we really can't stop it. And I'm going to let Mr. Gregory answer the other questions I asked about clear title and what would be required, because I'm not sure. So, but thank you, Lynn. I know where you're coming from, and it's out of your heart, believe me. So Mr. Gregory, do you want to weigh in on those?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. And so, so procedurally, the town can acquire real property, interest in real property, by a 2/3 vote of town meeting. And we would have to appropriate the funds necessary for the upkeep and operation of the cemetery going forward. To Gary's question earlier, or comments about the title, a fair amount of due diligence would need to be done before the town could be in a situation to acquire the land. And one of those considerations, excuse me, that Gary mentioned was to verify whether there's a clear title to the property. So my suggestion through the chair would be it may be worthwhile, and I know attorneys are expensive, and I know the financial situation that you're in, but it may be worthwhile to get an attorney to help you start that beginning process. Now, I guess from my perspective, and this echoes what Mr. Woodbury was saying a moment ago, you know, the town, and I understand the request, and I understand the dignity, certainly, but the issue, I guess from my perspective, or concern I have is we're having a hard enough time as it is keeping up our public buildings, and I've carved out a position, and the board of selectmen is supportive of the new position, full-time facilities maintenance lead, to try to stay on top of all of the scheduled maintenance and inspections that we typically fall behind on, just because we don't have the staff to handle it. So I know these are the same concerns I've shared with the board the last time this discussion came up, and they're the same concerns. So, but I also see the value in putting the question before the voters. So if the board wishes to green light this ballot, this petition, the timing tonight is right. We're outside of the 35-day window before the annual town election that the board can vote tonight to put it on the ballot. So, and I think I would say let's keep the conversation going, and that's
Thank you for that, Tom.
Okay.
And again, I do appreciate that, and that's my thought process. Unfortunately, we couldn't vote tonight. We wouldn't have a majority of the board tonight that could vote on this. But I think this all, and I'm glad Mr. Shemet brought up about the possible grants, because, as you know, we struggle, when the trees came down at the other cemetery, is to find the money to at least, if nothing else, to try to pick up the danger. And this is my concern, is as we draw thin, is I don't know how we maintain, I don't know how we do it, I guess. I haven't figured that out yet. I have a lot more questions, and I know that they're hitting desperate times, and somehow we got to figure out a way to help. And Mr. Shemet brought up a good one with grants. I think the agent at the cemetery could qualify for some. But again, they'd have to dissolve their nonprofit corporation, or if they held it, how much liability would fall, or wherever the liability would fall when we put people on that property. If they no longer had liability insurance, does the town have to cover it? That's where you get into the legality, in my opinion. And again, I'm not an attorney, but common sense would tell me that if, God forbid, if we sent a highway worker there and he got hurt, or if there was somebody that fell and there was a liability there, and even though the nonprofit corporation was still maybe not active, but still in control, because chapter 114, section 80, and as I went through, I think I went to Mass General Law. I apologize, it might have been 155, I'm not sure. Clearly states the responsibilities of corporations, what their involvements are. And again, I don't have a problem putting this on as I said, because they are in dire straits and they've reached out for help several times. And I don't have all the good answers, but I wouldn't be doing myself justice, the town justice, or the cemetery commission, commissioners that are sit on that nonprofit any justice if I didn't bring up these questions that are clearly going to be out there and clearly have to be defined. So at that point, I've done a lot of talking. Lynn, thank you for answering those questions. John, do you have any questions?
No, but
Hang
it's
on.
something we definitely need to look into a little further.
Okay. Go ahead. Who is that,
Just a
Bill, again?
clarification. Yes, under the rule of necessity, you could actually vote tonight for the voters to speak at the annual town election on a non-binding item. If Dr. Hicks, if he chose, could, under the rule of necessity, participate to vote to let the voters say their piece. Because under that, you could vote that way, as he indicated to Mr. Howard earlier in this very meeting in regard to the cable representative from the select board. So your decision, but just want to let you know your options.
Mr. Chairman, the 35-day period, I think, would not be exhausted going to March 22nd. Am I right, Mr. Gregory?
You are right.
That's correct. You also have to, the board also has to keep in mind that the registrars have 7 days to certify the signatures. So I believe that's already been done, but if it hasn't.
It has been.
Okay, so I was going to say, if it hasn't been done, you'd have to add 7 days on to 35. So if the board wished to take this matter up on the 22nd and take a vote that night, you'd still be outside. You'd still be good. You'd still be outside the 35-day window.
And John did not vote according to the rule of necessity. John has every right to vote for himself for any office title on this board, just as, you know, I had a right to vote for myself to be chairman, and Gary had a right to vote for himself as vice chairman, et cetera. So I wouldn't draw a clear comparison. But if it comes to the 22nd and Tony isn't here, and Gary and I are here with John, I will vote at that time if I have to. I just would rather keep it as clean as possible. And as a private citizen, I think the voters should have a right to vote on it. It's an important issue. Proudies are buried up there, Sugden, Lothrop, all the town greats, if you will, are buried in that cemetery. Along with a lot of other people who, during my past 70 plus years, had a role in running this town and providing this town with great professional and business services. So certainly the folks in the town have a right to vote and say yes or no, this is what we want to do. But I'd rather not unless I absolutely have to vote. But I will if I have to. Thank you.
And Dr. Hicks is correct. That being said, Mr. Gregory, I just want everybody, seems like I'm playing the bad guy all the time, but I just want to be crystal clear on where we stand today. Mr. Gregory, can you tell me what the budget is today for the old cemetery?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have, there's nothing, there's no funds in the operating budget for the maintenance of that cemetery. If you recall, the board, I'm sorry?
And you had to come to us for us to even get those trees taken care of. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. I was going to mention that maybe 3 years ago, the cemetery commissioners came to see me to express a concern about a number of really large limbs that were in danger of falling. So if you remember, we cobbled together some funds from the various perpetual care funds, the interest that was earned on those funds, and then we also went to town meeting for a small supplement. If I remember, it was about, I'm trying to remember, it was about maybe $15,000 or $16,000 all told, to do some real significant tree trimming up there. But there are no funds in the operating budget, year in, year out. There's no department there.
And thank you for that, Mr. Gregory. And that was my point, is we have an old cemetery that we actually have zero budgeted. And I guess that, and again, I hate talking about cemeteries because that's where all our loved ones end up. But at the end of the day, we don't have a budget for the one that is owned by us now. And we had a cemetery commission, and I can tell you, my kids are in their 40s now, but I can tell you that one of their first jobs was cutting grass up there. And I just want to be clear that even if this passed, even if we don't have a budget for the cemetery we have now, and we'd be hard pressed to find how we're going to come up and take care of another one that, I think, and I was going back to what Mr. Shemet brought up because he stole my thunder, and I don't usually like what to do. No, just kidding. Is there have to be some type of grant, something we can incorporate? I think it would, again, I don't know how many plots are left up there, and I'm sure some of them are pre-sold down the road. But I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think that, they have the signatures. It requires, and in my mind, it's well-deserved to move it forward. That's what the citizens of this town asked us to do. They have the signatures, and that is our responsibility. And we will let the voters decide, and they deserve for their voice to be heard, I guess is where I'm going. Anybody else have any other questions on this?
I would just like to say that going forward, this is Lynn Stevens speaking, that I will contact our attorney and see what she can tell me about a clear title. Sell 5, how many acres did we sell? We sold some acreage to an abutter, and so I believe a title search was done then to take care of that. I also would like to contact Bill Shemeth and get some more guidance or the town planner on the open space plan protection, and work on that.
I think that no matter what, Lynn, I think that's no matter what happens here, we will definitely, in my opinion, we're going to move it forward. I can't see where any members of this board would not even think of doing that. And that was my question, is when Ronnie Brown bought some of that land, there would have been some type of search done. And I wasn't going to talk about all this tonight. I figured I'd make a phone call to you, Lynn, and try to get some of the background that maybe will help us move this forward. So.
Sure. My question, though, before I finish off, is how does things get done or maintenance completed at the old cemetery if there's no money to pay for it?
So that's a good question, Lynn. I don't know exactly, so I can't answer that. I'll gladly find out exactly what's done up there by who. I do know. I believe my son Christopher. I believe Danielle Gibo. I think they're involved on that. It might be Frank White. I'm not sure of all the people, but if we're lucky, maybe they can. I don't have that answer. I don't know. Tom, do you?
I think the highway department helps out, but I'd have to get some specifics from them on to respond to the question.
The other thing that the other thing I've been trying to do with the distribution of these pamphlets is to create a Friends of the Cemetery group, and once we get out of this COVID, situation, figure out if they can be utilized at all to help care for the cemetery. But again, I'm not sure how our liability insurance would affect that, the capability of volunteers working there.
Lynn, one last question, your biggest expense is the maintenance, the cutting, the trimming, is that what's killing you? I'm just curious. I don't know.
I think that, and I think just maintaining the tools and making sure our tools are still working. We did have to buy a new tractor this past year because one of them did die. So that doesn't help. I think also the payroll, that type of thing.
Okay, because that's kind of what I thought it was. And again, I just
and our guys have been working less hours every year that I've been on this board. You know, they at the beginning when I started 7 years ago, I think that there was about 50 to 60 hours a week. Now we're down to about 30 to maybe even less than that. So we've done our reduction as much as we can.
No, and Lynn, I'm not questioning that. I'm just trying to figure out what your biggest cost is. That's really that's maybe I don't know. I got to dig a little more, Lynn. But again, I just
any ideas?
No, I know. And we're here because we do have a citizen's petition to place, and it's non-binding on the warrant. And as long as we have plenty of time to do that, like I say before, because I don't want to miss that deadline no matter what, because we wouldn't be doing our job if we did. But any other questions from the board or?
Through the chairman? I have a question, Mr. Woodbury. Dr.
Sure,
Hicks,
go ahead, Mr. Howe.
Are you concerned about voting tonight to move this forward?
Yeah, I'd rather not, John. I really think there's no rush. We've got more than 35 days on March 22nd. Okay. And if the deadline were, if we didn't have the 35 days, otherwise I would do it. The rule of necessity would kick in. Mr. Shimeth is right. But we have an opportunity at our next meeting to do this. Hopefully, Mr. Pepe will be here and you two gentlemen will be here. And I would prefer to wait for that. I'd rather have it be above board.
Doing that, I'll make a motion and we petition this to the next meeting.
I've already done that, Joe.
Oh, we done it?
We're okay with
I already directed
to move it forward.
the administrator to do that.
So we'll be all right. It will be on the next agenda. We'll take care of it.
Thank you, John.
Somebody else cut in to speak. Who did I miss?
That was Lynn. I was just trying to ask if it's definitely going to be on the next agenda. And also, is there, I got a notice about it being on the agenda tonight. Will I get another notice about it being on the March 22nd agenda?
We'll make sure they let you know, Lynn, but it will definitely be there because we're working within the time cycle and I don't want to miss that. So we'll definitely make sure you know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did somebody else break in to speak? I heard somebody, but I don't.
Yes, through the chair. This is Chris Woodbury. I serve on the Old Cemetery Commission. I just want to speak about the Old Cemetery. We have no budget for the Old Cemetery. Our maintenance is done by the Highway Department in between all the other maintenance that they do for the town. I understand Mrs. Stevens' plight on maintaining the cemetery. It is a big task. It takes a lot of money. We currently at the old cemetery spent about $30,000 over the past couple of years to remove trees that were a danger to people in the cemetery and around the cemetery. We also have gravestones that are knocked over that we just cannot afford to reset. We are in a challenging time up at that cemetery. So I just want to let people know that we are facing this issue currently.
So I don't want to cut you off, Chris. However, you know, this one is actually about a citizen's petition, and we all know the budget constraints that everybody's under. However, I do want to move this forward because of the fact that you know, and whatever happens at the old cemetery is happening. But this is about a citizen's petition to have a non-binding question on the annual town meeting. So unfortunately, that's the task at hand. I'm not saying that there aren't needs all over. However, that is our task. So if there's nothing else, I will turn this back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to the town administrator's report. Lynn, thank you for coming. And Dean, you too. I saw you there.
I'm here. Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. You do a lot of good work, and I know you don't get anything out of it. Thank you. Tom, would you like to give us the budget update, please, for FY22?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So not much has changed. Really, nothing's changed on the town side of things. I received the version 3 budget, including for fiscal 22 from the regional school district, which includes the most recent assessment to the town. And the numbers, the plan that the regional school district is proposing in this version 3 is an allocation of what's called the ESSER2 grant. It's part of the coronavirus relief funds from the federal government. And the regional school district is proposing to use up to 75% of their allocation they're not using the full 75%, but they're using a percentage of their allocation under the allotted 75% to essentially reduce the minimum local contribution to the member towns. So for the town of Spencer, they're proposing to reduce the minimum local contribution by $210,244. And at the same time, they're requesting that the operating assessment over the minimum be increased. So the net result of this positions the town $118,000 away from being able to get them that full amount. So that's where we stand right now. There have been no changes to the town's operating budget since I filed fiscal projection 1 with the board last month. So we're essentially $118,000 apart, the town and the regional school district. So I'll have more to share with the board after I meet with Dr. Haughey and Gary Suter on Wednesday, and I'll have more details on this. But it's a pretty substantial gap. So really, that's the only update I have at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Tom, this year's assessment to the district is just under $50,000 less than it was the previous year. Am I right?
The fiscal 21 assessment to Spencer went up over fiscal 20 by $100,000 approximately.
I must have the wrong sheet. So I'll call you tomorrow, and I want to get the right sheet because my numbers don't make sense. And I
Okay,
don't want to say anything else until I get the right numbers. So you and I will talk tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
sure. Okay.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Gregory, Gary, John?
Tom, I do. If you could just back up.
Go ahead.
Again, because I watched that meeting. I kind of went through the numbers. So, Tom, you had mentioned 210,000 some odd dollars.
Yeah.
It would reduce the minimum requirement by that amount. So is that a one-time thing? Because that tells me that that's going to get kicked back in somewhere down the road
Well,
if they're reducing it for a one-time thing. Am I wrong?
That's exactly right. So that's and I should have said that earlier. So that's in addition to just the number, the delta between the town and the district. The real concern here is that this is a one-time local contribution. So you know, I'm just reading from the school district's assessment, their transmittal to me, which basically says municipalities should be prepared to budget for any potential increase in their minimum local contributions for fiscal 23. So I need to learn a little bit more about this, and I will when I have the conversation with Dr. Haughey and Gary Suter on Wednesday. But I'm very concerned about what this means for fiscal 2023. If it's going to go back up to what it had been prior to the grant allocation, and then another further increase, that creates a huge jump from where we are right now to some large number, and very large number in fiscal 23. So I think the devil's in the details here a little bit. I need to learn a little bit more about this and what this means. But if this is what they're proposing for fiscal 22, that means the immediate challenge for us is how do we have a conversation about $118,000 a gap between what the town is recommending and what the regional school district is proposing for an assessment. So,
and that was my question is as I went through these numbers and I looked, I'm saying if that's a one-time reduction in local aid and minimum local aid, and next year obviously minimum local aid would increase by a certain percentage. So if that was 80,000, round numbers use 100, then when that's built into the budget and it comes back because we didn't pay this year the minimum contribution, theoretically we could be facing a $300,000 increase just based on local contribution on the minimum. If I'm reading these numbers right now, and I know you'll get clarity, but as I read the numbers presented, that's the only logical explanation I can come up with that again, I'd have to look hard at it. I can tell you is at 210,000 being forgiven this year and comes back at us in 2023 along with any other minimum local contribution. It would tear this town apart because then we'd be into a worse scenario whether we can hire a building guy or not. So if you could get clarity, I'd appreciate it. I did happen to see the meeting. I do have the numbers written down. Unfortunately, I wrote them on a paper towel, so I'd like to see it clearly. And I know Mr. Shemeth had requested that that night, and I'm pretty sure I was told that you would have those numbers. So and I'll continue to break them down. But on the at face value, that's what's telling me is that we're going to be faced with that 210 forgiven for 1 year is going to come back next year with any other increases. So if you get clarity, I'd appreciate that. But that's what I'm reading. I don't know if you saw different.
no, and I feel the same way. So the way I look at it, I feel exactly the same way. If we're apart right now by $118,000, the way I read it is the real delta is $328,000, right? Because the 100, right? Because the 210,000 is a one-time break to municipalities. So
right.
That's how I look at it. So the real delta, you know, and the bigger picture here is $328,000. So, but I will. I'll get clarity. I'll get clarity this Wednesday. And I should say, Mr. Chairman, I did earlier this afternoon. I had forwarded the version 3 budget to the full finance committee, so they all have a copy of this now.
Mr. Gregory, I'm looking here at FY16 to 20 in the regional school district's assessment to Spencer. And those years got over $200,000 a year increase. Couple of them, just by looking at this stuff, and I haven't done the math to dig these papers out here, $300,000 a year increase. And so I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind, that this is what we have traditionally given them. And if we're, you know, just keep that in the back of your mind. And I'll give you a call tomorrow. I want to go over some things with you before you meet on Wednesday with those other two gentlemen. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay, John, you all set on this issue?
That's fine.
Okay, we're going to move on to the second round of citizens input. Citizens, anybody out there wish to speak?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman.
I've got a couple of people. I saw Jared Grigg.
Yes,
wanna
hi,
speak?
Chairman.
Hello.
Yes, sir. So I just had a question. It's more for Chief Darren in the promotional part of what you guys adopted. Do you guys provide a veterans preference within that promotional?
I believe so. David?
Yes, there is. It's combined in with the outside employment additional points we give for that. There's also, if there's armed services there, the point goes along with that as well.
Okay, thank you.
That is correct.
You're welcome, sir. Who else did I have? I had three or four different voices.
Bill Shemeth, Doctor.
Go ahead, please, Bill.
First, in regard to the school budget, my recollection of our discussions prior to the fall town meeting was that the school district was on a one-time basis reducing what they were asking us for, and Tom agreed we would anticipate returning that to them for the annual town meeting. I just want to make sure that's happening. Secondly, we don't know what the school district or ourselves will receive from the federal stimulus bill, which will be finalized later this week, and that could change all that discussion. Secondly, in regard to the town clerk position, I agree we have a short-term problem with the legislation that should be fixed so that we don't have, that's one issue, but I think it's a little premature to be saying when we have qualified people running that we should be looking to shift that from the voters to the board at this point, or the administrator at this point. If we reach a point, have an election and we can't get a qualified person, that's a different story. But the checks and balances is what federal, state, and local government is all about. And the keeper of the local records is a check and balance. And having that as an elected position has gone back to colonial times. So I would tread very carefully on that and have a lot of concerns about that. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your concerns, Mr. Shiveth. I will say this, and I don't usually comment on this, is that if it happens we don't have a qualified candidate, it will be too late to do anything about it, because this cannot happen overnight. It's a very lengthy process. Anyway, others on citizen input.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? This is Tom.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Gregory.
I just wanted to respond to the first part of what Mr. Shemeth had asked. So I just want to remind the board that when the regional school district came to the town in the fall with a revised final figure assessment that was substantially lower, the discussions that we had focused on not tying up those newfound dollars with recurring expenses. So if you remember, we went to town meeting with two one-time appropriations, a $250,000 appropriation to stabilization, then a $50,000 appropriation into the OPEB fund to preserve capacity within the general fund to absorb, all of the anticipated increases for fiscal 22, not just the school, not just the assessment from the regional school district. So there was no more discussion than that. That was how we left it. And so if the town wants to, use stabilization dollars to make up the gap, that's certainly something that's possible. But it was never that specific strategy was never talked about back in the fall. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but I just want to set the record straight about what the board and I talked about last fall. And again, that was not the idea. Was the intent was the strategy was not to tie up those newfound revenue dollars with recurring expenses. That was the overriding strategy, and that's what I think. And I know that's what the record will show. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that money, OPEB money, it's gone. Stabilization is there unless the voters want to vote 2/3 at a town meeting. However, the revenue was raised last year for that, and the money for that one-year revenue went into those two accounts. That revenue is being raised, was raised this year and will be raised again next year. And if that money,
no, not necessarily. No, Mr. Chairman, no. So I'm sorry. So those were just one-time expenses, a one-time appropriate.
It wasn't part of the budget.
No. So if you remember,
I don't.
We transferred. I get the warrant article right here. The town meeting transferred from taxation 200. Let me just find the article here.
Like 260.
I have to just pull it up on my screen. Just bear with me for a second.
I want to say.
The town transferred from taxation $251,000 approximately into the stabilization account and $50,000 from taxation into the OPEB trust. So those were one-time appropriations out of a recurring revenue stream. So whenever you do that, whenever you appropriate one-time appropriation out of a recurring revenue stream, the following year you have that revenue stream available.
Right.
That's how. Right. So, but that was used. That was used. All of that was used in assembling this year's operating budget. So I can't say that.
You gave that money to other town departments. Is that what you're saying?
It just goes into the hopper. It goes into the pot, right? Because money's fungible. I can't say that this dollar goes to that department and that dollar goes to another department. It just goes into the, the hopper to balance the budget. So, and that's where we're left right now. So we're left with $118,000 gap. Okay, so
yeah,
I'm sorry. So I guess what I'm saying is, we'd have to do some cutting. We'd have to either cut or do a combination of cutting and supplementing with other funds, either free cash or stabilization, to get them the full amount of what they're asking for right now.
Well, I'm going to talk to you tomorrow, because I'll tell you right now, I'm a little bit confused, and I've been a selectman for 10 years and held a lot of other offices in this town, as well as being a school administrator. And all I'm going to say is that when you raise money through taxation, it's in the levy limit, and that levy limit stays as a rule unless you're able to lower the levy limit, which we're not. And that money, if it was customarily earmarked for police, fire, highway, wherever, all right, there's an anticipation by those departments that that money will be available next year, and that they will also get an increase on that if they can prove that they need an increase, which they always can with inflation and salary. But you and I will talk tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't want to continue this here. I want to get a better handle on it with you.
Very good.
Okay, anybody else
through
on
the-
this issue?
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So, and it's pretty clear on what we did is we put that into stabilization.
That's clear.
And nowhere.
That's clear.
And I've looked through every meeting to see where it said that we would take that money and influx it back to them. That was never said. I've looked at every meeting I can find. However, what Mr. Gregory is saying in this instance is true, is those dollars are through taxation. We as a board in negotiating with the unions are contractually obligated to fill that. So when you look at the contracts that we have negotiated and look at what those numbers are costing us and through cost of living increases and everything, you can bet that a good portion of that isn't available. So it's not like it's there and that it was just stockpiled. Is we have obligations to contracts, we have obligations of what it takes to operate the town. So it's not, I don't want it to come across like we have this money sitting in the bank and we're going to sit on it. We used it for one-time expense because we know every year is we're going to have an increase. Just like every year, I can tell you this separation between the town and the state, ever since I've been on this board, is about $400,000 that we start with. So I just want to be clear that we didn't put that money into stabilization saying, God forbid, if we need it, we're pulling it out to give to the schools or we're going to give to the police department. So, I mean, and I think we.
Yep. Why don't you and I go up tomorrow and see Mr. Gregory and.
Good idea.
It's getting late here and that's not what I mean. Okay. I maybe I'm not expressing.
I'm with you.
Good enough. I'm sorry. But I'll call you in the morning, Gary. We'll find a time with Mr. Gregory. When we go up there, just the two of us, not a majority of the board, and we'll thrash this.
Let's see what it is. Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. John, are you all set?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else here on the call wants to say anything about anything? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Caller 14, identify yourself.
Matt DeFosi?
7 Paul's Drive. Hi, Matt.
Correct. Hey, I just want to, I just like to pipe in for a minute and say I support what Mr. Woodbury spoke to previously about an applicant having to be a resident of the town. I think speaking as a resident, I want the town to pick the best applicant. I don't care where they go when they leave their job for the day. So I think it puts the town in a detrimental position if you make them be a resident of the town. So I just wanted to support that comment.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to board
Yep,
member
Mr.
and staff
Chairman.
comments. Yes,
Well,
John?
Jonathan Biner.
Yes.
Regarding the town clerk position discussion,
Yes.
will doing that require a change to the Spencer Governmental Act?
It may. Yeah, I would assume that it would, but I don't want to say for sure. I'm not a lawyer. But a minor change. Just so you know, John. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm going back on what was said earlier. I thought there was 2 options available to do it, and that it may not necessarily require a change to the Spencer Governmental Act. I don't know. I forget who it was that was speaking to that earlier. Possibly the administrator.
Mr. Chairman, I could respond. So I have to get an answer to that. If the statutory option of the 2 options, the town meeting and then the ballot hurdle, the 2 hurdles, is selected, and that is what is chosen as the path to do this, I don't think the special act would change. It may change if the second option is selected, the home rule petition, but I can get an answer one way or the other.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. We'll get you an answer, John.
All right, so then, yeah, so to follow up on that, back when I submitted the citizen petition to change the planning board from appointed to elected, why was I told at that time that any change to a public official's appointment / versus elected position required a change to the Spencer Governmental Act?
Mr. Gregory?
I'd have to go back. I don't have that right in front of me, those notes right in front of me, so I'd have to go back and look at that again, but I'd be happy to do that.
Can we get that for the next meeting, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd very much appreciate an answer on that, because that seems to be suspect to me.
We'll get you an answer, John. I want to know it too. I definitely want to know it. Thank you. Anyone else
Thank
on
you.
citizen input? Okay, we're going to move on to board member and staff comments. Hearing none, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by John Howard, seconded by Gary Woodbury. Roll call vote. Mr. Howard,
Aye.
Mr. Woodbury,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
This conference is now